I'm going to take a quick guess and guess that you, yes you, the viewer, have a strong opinion about the ending to this year's NASCAR championship. And I bet you are probably writing that opinion down out in the comments right now. And you should be, because this is a very discussion-worthy race here. There's so much to talk about, and I can't wait to share my opinion on the Ford Ecoboost 400 because there's a lot of things to break down here. I think emotions are going to run high for a lot of people, and I'm going to try to be the mediary between kind of the two extremes I think we're going to get. So, first off, I think as a whole, and we're talking, kind of big picture here, this was probably the best case scenario for NASCAR under this current format, particularly when we're talking, spoiler alert, about what happened at Martinsville and the two protagonists that were really, or what the championship came down to between the two drivers. Spoiler alert, NASCAR Heat 3 was right in my prediction video. It was Joey Logano beating Martin Truex Jr. to the championship. And not only do you have that storyline for NASCAR, you also have the fact that Furniture Row Racing didn't win. And despite pretty much all of the kind of impartial fans, the ones who weren't 100% for Harvick, Busch, or Logano, I think everybody really was looking for Furniture Row Racing. The problem is, from an optics perspective, NASCAR did not want that to happen. You don't want the optics out there that, oh, hey, look, the team that just won the last two championships won the championship again and now is not there anymore. So they had a solid team, Penske Racing, a driver, Joey Logano, 28 years old. He's going to be around for quite a while in probably his current role, probably for life unless he AJ Allmendingers himself. Because Roger Penske is very loyal to his drivers, and when they pay dividends like they have here with Joey Logano, they will stick around for a while. So from that perspective, NASCAR made out like a bandit as far as I'm concerned. Another thing that they really got lucky on, and part of the reason why I believe this race was so good, was the fact the first four in this race were the first four in the points championship, the best four drivers the whole season, and really, save for one example, which we're going to talk about briefly, they were the four cars that were the class of the field in the race. If you're going to have this format and you're going to have a playoff, having the top four seeds, stick and ball reference, believe me, we're going to talk about that too, having the top four seeds of the championship table in that final race is the best possible scenario because, again, you don't have any Ryan Newmans in there like you did, I think it was in 14, where people are like, even if he's running up front at Homestead, you go, he doesn't really belong there. So everybody belonged. The race came down to the two drivers that had been played up through the media, throughout the media cycle, as kind of the two that had the most animosity towards each other. And then, and at the end of the day, they ended up racing each other clean. So it didn't turn into a dog and pony show. You had a legitimate champion. And speaking of legitimacy, I want to also commend NASCAR here for running a really clean weekend. There was no doubt in anybody's mind that the three champions, the three drivers who were crowned, earned it on the racetrack. Because, at least in the first two races outside of the stage cautions, there were no cautions at all. So Brett Moffitt and Tyler Reddick went out there, won the race, did what they had to do, won the championship. Then you go to the Cup Series race, a little less clean. We had some accidents. We had one in particular that was very eye-raising. We'll talk about that one here in a second. But regardless, again, it was settled on track. It was the top four in the championship in the first four positions. You can't script that any better than what happened. Logano ends up coming out on top. So under the format, Logano did everything he needed to do to win the championship. There were no phantom debris cautions. The crashes that did happen and the yellows that were thrown, I felt were more than legitimate. So really, I'm going to give NASCAR a lot of credit for some of the things that were out of their control, like the fact that the first four, in spite of the championship format, were able to get to Homestead. And when they did, they put on the show that everybody expects. I would say, really, why not just have a legit points championship up till the 35th race and then take the top four in the championship and do a winner-take-all at Homestead? I think that's almost a better system if you insist on doing something like this, because I don't think you can get much better than what we saw here, at least under the current format. And again, like I said, it's because the top guys in the sport were going after it. So I want to talk really quick about NBC Sports because one of the topics of discussion, literally in my last video, was talking about NASCAR coverage and the fact that it looks like Fox Sports is starting to roll back and say, well, they're starting to look like they're getting cold feet about everything. NBC Sports rolled out what I felt like it was a true big game feel presentation for this event. I watched the pre-race on NBC. Then was informed that, hey, you should probably be watching the NBC Sports coverage because I was aware of this, but I wasn't aware how good the coverage was over on NBC Sports. Let me explain. So the NBC Sports channel had Lee Diffie from the IndyCar coverage and Dale Jarrett in the booth, and they were providing pretty minimal coverage. I'm going to put up a picture of what this looked like on the screen. Or at least minimal commentary, like the only necessary commentary they would provide. And then it was kind of supplemented with spotter radio, in-car radio, pit communications. You had the main TV feed along with a couple sidebars with information, the track map where the top four in the championship are running. You also had the top four in the championships onboard cameras prominently displayed at all times, so you were never out of the loop watching the NBC Sports network. And I also have to say that that coverage in particular was fantastic because it was clearly geared to a racing fan, and God forbid they would do that on the big NBC, because I'm going to get into the real criticism I have with the big NBC coverage, but you didn't have like Jeff Burton and Dale Jr. constantly shouting over each other. You didn't have Steve Letarte coming in there and saying something silly. You didn't have problems with Rick Allen. You just had Diffie and Dale Jarrett essentially bench racing and really getting into the nitty-gritty of it, but not going so far in the fanboy direction that it became obsessive and annoying. I made the comparison on Twitter that it felt a lot like a 90s ESPN broadcast with Bob Jenkins, Ned Jarrett, and Benny Parsons. Probably because Bob Jenkins was originally an IndyCar guy, and while not necessarily originally an IndyCar guy, he was more of a V8 supercar guy originally. Lee Diffie kind of comes from that, or is cut from that same cloth, and obviously, literally, Dale Jarrett's cut from the same cloth as Ned Jarrett, so it really did feel a lot like that. I thought that particular coverage was absolutely spectacular. I feel bad for the people who do not have access to NBC Sports Network, because you were stuck with something that was really pandering to the normies out there, really pandering to the normies, particularly with the stick and ball references. God almighty, NBC, you got to calm it down with it was out of control. Racing is not a stick and ball sport. It would almost be like comparing Olympic swimming to baseball, or, track and field to the NFL. Sure, you can make that comparison, and it's competition. There's competitors out there. But constantly saying, well, he's swinging for the fences, or this is a Game 7 moment. Stuff like that is just so beneath the sport of auto racing. I don't know. I think a lot of that stuff turns people off. If you brought what you had, if you have Lee Diffie, Dale Jarrett, and let's say Kyle Petty, just for argument's sake. But put those guys in the booth, do it the way you did on NBC Sports, maybe a little bit more commentary so that they can explain things a little bit better, because obviously there won't be as many Smart Mark racing fans watching. But do it that way and have that kind of a presentation. I'm hoping that's what the IndyCar and IMSA coverage is going to be like next year on NBC, because I think if you cater more to a racing fan, I think most people who are willing to turn into an auto race aren't that stupid to begin with. So you don't have to hold their hand necessarily. You can explain things. You can, maybe do some fluff segments and whatnot here and there, but you don't have to go so far in the Darrell Waltrip direction. Okay. That's enough about TV. We'll talk about the race real quick. There's really only one notable thing outside the championship four to talk about. That was Kyle Larson. God almighty, if Kyle Larson ever gets to Homestead, he is going to win the championship. Unless, of course, he does what he did here, which is get a flat tire and really fall out of contention. Kyle Larson is so good at Homestead Miami Speedway. The progressive banking helps him out a ton. He's able to run that high line. Oh, wait a second. I just realized the package is going to be completely different next year. It's probably going to be a plate race next year, or at least a pack race style. Never mind. Throw everything out what I just said. If you like this race at Homestead, it's probably not going to be the same next year. So I guess enjoy it while you can, because this was your last opportunity to enjoy it. So, okay, let's talk about the Big Four. I guess it's the Big Four, right? Yeah, it's the Big Four. The Big Three as well, but the Big Three were the ones who lost the championship. So, Eric, my hat's off to you. Let's talk about in the order that they finished. So Kyle Busch was the last of the chasers, as he said, which I, again, tip my hat to you, Kyle Busch. He was definitely the worst car all day. He never really had a chance to get up front. It was clear that the handling wasn't there, and his pit stops were pretty much god-awful. I think people were really crapping on the guy in the green suit. The second one was definitely not his fault. I think the jackman dropped the car too early, or at least didn't see that the hose was still under the car when he dropped it. It got caught on the splitter, But they did have a fantastic pit stop on the last pit sequence, so they were able to get back up front. They did run an interesting strategy there. They kept Kyle Busch out for a very long time. Looked like a pretty smart decision. Again, if he'd had a better car, he probably could have won the championship. Unfortunately, he was my pick to win the championship. In fact, all of my picks to win the championship didn't have very good days. Johnny Sauter was, I think, last of the chasers in the truck series. Coleslaw Custard, he was probably pretty close. He was probably the closest to winning the championship of my picks. He still got beat by Tyler Reddick. And then obviously Kyle Busch had a terrible day. So if I picked your driver to win the championship, I'm terribly sorry for that one. So let's talk about Kevin Harvick. This is the one prediction where I really kind of got it right. I felt like Harvick was going to have a dominant car. He did, but then he just fell off. It didn't look like he had a good car for the nighttime conditions. I think Harvick in his post-race interview said it was too loose. That's kind of what I expected. It seems like more often than not this year, even though Harvick has 8 wins, he probably could have doubled that this year. It just seems like he always has the dominant car and something takes him out of that race lead near the end of the race and takes that win away from him. It happened here again. So the weakness that I was kind of able to identify on Harvick turned out to be true. So Harvick doesn't win the championship. We don't have to speculate whether or not the win was going to be encumbered. Okay, let's talk about Truex. The fairy tale moment. It looked like it was going to happen. He had the strongest car late in the going. The problem was it was a long run car, not a short run car. And unfortunately, it seems like more often than not, you need a short run car in this kind of a situation because of the way NASCAR races usually tend to play out. So that was unfortunate because I think he had a short run car last year that helped him beat Kyle Busch to the championship. Bad pit stops. Again, it seemed like he and Kyle Busch were really bitten by this. They lost a ton of time in the pit lane, which Truex then had to go out and make up on the racetrack. I think if they'd had better pit stops, even though the last one, kind of like Kyle Busch's pit stop, was their best one of the night, if they'd had those consistent pit stops throughout the day, I think we're talking about a very different story. The irony of ironies. At what point did Nelson Piquet Jr. start driving the 19 car? Because it was Kyle Busch leading, and then suddenly the 19's in the wall. And even though I couldn't possibly believe that they were able to convince Suarez to do anything, and I'm not suggesting Suarez did anything intentionally here, but the fact that he helped out JGR significantly in that, he gave them exactly what they needed in that little incident. But he also completely screwed over Truex, who was really chasing down Harvick. And as we saw with Harvick, the car wasn't there. He'd already passed Logano. That was really the major hurdle. Logano definitely had the best car all day. So the fact that the caution came out, and I think it was Brad as well involved in there, so I guess we can blame Brad as well. Brad and Suarez, the two drivers of the teams that were really the biggest threat to Truex, both crashed into each other and essentially screwed Truex out of the championship. That thing goes green to the end. Truex wins easily. He did have the restart of his life after having a really terrible restart. I think it was on the first stage restart. Absolutely awful. Then you get back to the final restart of the race. He goes and zooms off into the lead. Looks like he's got the championship won. If Kyle Busch had held off Logano for a couple more laps, or maybe at least made Logano use his tires up a little bit more, maybe we're talking about a different story. But now it's time to talk about him. Logano, the guy that even people like me said he's the 4th seed. Now, I will say that a lot of people were kind of crapping on me for saying what I said about Logano in the prediction video. It's not to say that I didn't expect this, and I think I even put at the end of the video, look, Logano is still very much a threat in this race. Remember, he locked himself in a race early, so they had a race to kind of work on the car and be able to say, okay, what do we need for Homestead? They did that, and it was clear, it was obvious, because since he was locked in, they were able to get everything done. And again, Logano went out there and earned it. It was exactly the performance he needed to put forth. He got it done. And again, he was the fastest short run car of the race. And again, that is the key. If we look at all these championships, especially the last few years, you look at Kyle Busch, short run wins the race. Jimmy Johnson, short run wins the race. Truex, short run car wins the race. Joey Logano, short run car wins the race. So now we have the formula, at least for this particular package of NASCAR. Again, who knows what will happen next year, but it looks like you need a short run car to win this race. There's always a caution within the last 20 laps of these races. It always seems to be that way. So, and the battle, I have to say, with Truex, there was one moment where they touched, and then everything else was copacetic and clean. So, and that was kind of the thing that I wanted to, or the point I wanted to make about Truex. It was clear that he wanted to win this championship clean. There was probably points where he could have wrecked Logano, probably taken himself out of the race too. But I don't think Truex races that way. I don't think he wants to race that way. And he don't think he wanted to win a championship that way. You can agree or disagree with that, however you feel. That's the way he wanted to do it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Logano made the choice he made at Martinsville, and he won the championship because of it. So make of that what you will. Team Penske as well. What a fantastic year for them. They've missed out on a few of the big races. They didn't win at Daytona for the 500. They won the Indy 500, missed out on the IndyCar Championship. Really didn't have a big sports car win this year unless you count Mid-Ohio. But on the NASCAR side of things, Brickyard 400. They also got they obviously got the championship. So Penske Racing had one of their better years of all time, and that's saying something because Penske Racing has been around for a long time. They've had a lot of great drivers driving for them, and it's looking very good for them, at least at this moment. And certainly going into the next year, you look at their teams across racing, across motorsports, they're probably only going to get better. It seems like each of their cars in each series is going very well. V8 Supercar Championship still up for grabs as well. Scotty McLaughlin in there with a chance for Team Penske to get that one as well. So a banner year across motorsports for Team Penske. Again, I think under the current format, and unfortunately this is how we have to qualify things now, Logano earned it. Again, because of what he did. Because of the fact that, hey, I can win at Homestead, therefore I can win the championship. Again, I will say at the very least, it was the top four in the championship. So we really can't say there was a true wild card there unless we're simply talking big three. But I think even Dale Jarrett said on the NBC Sports broadcast that even if you add Logano into the total of the wins with the big three, the four drivers won 64% of the races this year. And I guess I'll finish with this. One of the predictions I guess I made, or I guess one of the observations I made, was the fact that this season was so much like 2015 was in NASCAR. And guess who the dominant driver, and the driver who probably should have won the points championship that year, or at least won the chase race at Homestead, was Joey Logano. He was the best guy in 2015. So it doesn't really surprise me that in a year that plays out almost exactly the same beat for beat as 2015, Logano comes out on top. He's seen this situation before. He knew how to react to it. He got it done. Do I wish Truex would have won or Kyle Busch so I would have been right? Sure. Didn't happen that way. And, I mean, this is the problem with the format. I know there's going to be a ton of comments down below. People are going to be very upset. I know Kamikaze Games blew an absolute gasket. I hope his review comes out after or before mine so I don't get too much of a view hit, because if you haven't watched Kamikaze's review yet, you're going to have to, because, I mean, this was doomsday scenario for him. But anyway, that was the NASCAR Championship. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. NASCAR Heat 3 was right. It's doomsday, or maybe it's not. Who knows? We'll see you in the next video. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more NASCAR and motorsport content.